Welcome back to Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS. Clarity, understanding, and empathy. Common values for those on the front lines charting a bold way forward for African Americans in St. Louis. Stay tuned as we talk to these change makers, visionaries, and overcomers. I'll ask the questions you want to hear and get the clarity we all need about the issues we face. That's next on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS. Coming up next on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel, I introduce you to Donnie Seals Sr., a father who recovered from not one, but 3 open-heart surgeries, and his son, Eric D. Seals, a former ESPN producer, now filmmaker, who decided that part of his father's recovery would be a bike ride from St. Louis to Chicago together. What's more, Eric decides to film the journey. His documentary, Bike Vessel, is out now on PBS. How did the challenge impact their bond and their vision about their health as Black men? Donnie and Eric join me next on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS.
Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel is supported in part by Midwest Bank Center, the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation, and Orvin and Latrice Kimbrough.
When I'm writing, it's a feeling that it's almost out of body. I have no concept of time or space. I'm just rolling.
Today, I am riding with Donnie Seals Sr.
We're going to ride from St. Louis to Chicago.
After my surgery, it was not something I would even dream of.
I've had some medical issues, and biking has turned it around.
It's going to be a tough 4 days, man.
Let's do it.
Welcome back to another episode of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel. I am so glad you have chosen to join us yet again. And now that you're here, first of all, let me give you some instructions. I always have a little homework, and the number one thing is to become a subscriber. That way you know when new podcasts drop. We're working very hard to bring you interesting, joyful, bold conversations this season on Listen St. Louis. So come on in, the water's fine. Become a subscriber. Secondly, make sure that you click that like button. I know you're saying, well, how do I haven't even watched it yet, Carol. How do I know I like it? You know me. You know you like this, so go on and click that like button, okay? And then share. I've told this story before. I have friends at church. They are a husband and wife, and they share the podcast between one another. If he sees it first, he shares it with her. If she sees it first, she says, honey, have you seen this yet? I love that about them. So share with your husband, share with your wife, share with your friends, share with your coworkers. Spread this good information and these great conversations. And click that little bell. That'll let you know when new podcasts are dropping. We are so excited to have with us those two faces behind the documentary you'll see on 9 PBS and on PBS nationally, really, Bike Vessel. Joining us, a father and son, Eric D. Seals. He's a filmmaker, and his father, Donnie Seals Sr., join us now from Chicago, all the way with the help of Zoom. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you. It's great being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
So let us start with the title. Because when someone said to me, my vice president actually, last year, early in the year, there's a documentary coming about a father and son who bike from St. Louis to Chicago. It's called Bike Vessel. And I said, I don't know anything else, but I'm in because it sounds so interesting. Yeah. Eric, this was your idea, correct? To do a documentary. Yes.
That is correct. So the name Bike Vessel really didn't come into the middle of us filming. At the beginning of it, it was just bike documentary because I wasn't sure what to call it. But in the middle of us working on the project, my brother came out to me. He goes, I got the perfect name for the film. And he said, but if I tell you what it is, you have to go with it. I said, that's a bold statement. But he ended up being right. He named the film Bike Vessel, and he just started explaining it. He said, the title Bike Vessel has so many different meanings. Mm-hmm. And the most important one being that this was the vessel that helped Dad get healthy. Yeah. This was his bike vessel. And so when we think about when we're trying to get to different places in life, what is your vessel? It might be a bike, it might be swimming, it might be reading, whatever that might be. But this is what it was for my father. And so it was natural with the heart surgery, that he had and talking about the veins. It just really started to connect. And then we didn't look for a part two. It was bike vessel from the beginning to the end.
And so, Donnie, let's talk about your health. There is a scene in this documentary. This follows your journey to reclaiming your health. Your miraculous recovery is what doctors are calling it, have called it. You had not one, not two, but three open heart surgeries. Talk
That's
about your
correct.
life prior to these open heart surgeries.
Oh, prior to the open heart surgeries, I was in corporate America. I worked IBM. I taught IBM internals, the boring stuff. I taught the people that wrote IBM's code. Those are the people that I taught. I ended up getting into networking, became a networking specialist. High pressure. I fixed the problems that nobody else could fix. I was under a lot of stress, but didn't realize it at the time because I was living it and it was every day. I left IBM and went to another company called Hitachi, and I was this networking specialist for them. But in Chicago for IBM, I was networking specialist for the city. There was two of us. For Hitachi, we had two for the nation, so it was a lot of travel.
Donnie, you talked about the stress of working in corporate America, but you also, the diet is a part of this answer. Who you were before three open heart surgeries, your diet, and I know that Eric has said that he watched you drink and smoke for a decade or more or so. So your lifestyle is a part of this whole story. I mean, it is the story.
Oh, absolutely. It was horrific how I ate. As I look back, I was a smoker. I drank. I didn't drink excessively, but I did have, several drinks a week. One of my favorite sandwiches was liverwurst with a very, very strong cheese with
Wow.
onions. And the ribs, the bacon. My forte was grilling baby back ribs. Yeah, I ate everything. And I was born right on the border of Illinois, Wisconsin. And so I'm a cheese lover. And to the day, that's one of the hardest things for me to give up is cheese.
You have given it up.
I slowed down. I'll be honest. I slowed down.
Working on it.
Really, really slowed down. I could go across the border and there's this 8-year-old cheddar that, man, you just can't get it anywhere else. So no, I slowed down. I slowed down quite a bit, but no, I haven't given it up completely.
And again, when we dive into what this documentary is really about, Bike Vessel, with a father and son who bike from St. Louis to Chicago and the bonding that happens along the way, this is clearly about your health, your recovery, the change in lifestyle. But Eric, it's also about healthcare and how Black men view their own health and how they view themselves within a healthcare system. And I love the quote from, and I think it was a doctor, I'm not sure who said it, that we don't have a healthcare system, we have a disease detection and management system.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Dr. Terry Mason was one of our expert interviews, and it was amazing to sit down and talk with him. I wish I could use half the stuff he said off camera. Some of it was pushing the element a little bit, but I understand where he was coming from. And the main concept that I really walked away from throughout that interview was that, exactly as you said, our healthcare system, the doctors that we see are really there they're put in place to make you survive on the medicine. It's better for the healthcare system to have you be able to stay around and be addicted to the medicine to keep you alive, instead of really building in a regimen to change your eating so that you don't have to take this medicine anymore. And that's one of the big things that I took away from this documentary, is learning my dad's journey, because my whole life, he was always taking a lot of pills. Never really knew why. I knew he had, some sickness, because, when he had his first open heart surgery, I was around 8 or 9 years old. And so I didn't develop the concept until really talking throughout this documentary to understand that a lot of the medicine that he was on was to keep him alive, but then a lot of the medicine he was taking was to combat the results from the other medicine he took. And so the cure to all of this really comes to how we eat, exercise. I think we hear those things. We're like, yeah, exercise, eat good. That's no problem. But I don't think we really sit down and look into what food does to our body.
And Eric, when do you, because you just said you were 8 or 9 years old when he had his first open heart surgery, which was before the age of 50 for you, Donnie. But Eric, when do you realize that your father is not healthy? And do you ever, it crosses your mind, I know, that I may lose my dad?
Yeah, I think at an early age, I knew he got sick. He had to go to the hospital. He was in the hospital for like 3-4 months. And honestly, I would say that that memory was instilled in my brain so early that I never had a moment where that wasn't how his lifestyle was. I mean, for the longest time, he walked slow in the grocery store. He had to take a second to catch his breath because he was tired. He, would have these chest pains that would happen from time to time. And so I think if I really look in our history, I always witnessed that. It wasn't until he really wanted to start changing his life around that I started asking more questions. And that's one of the biggest takeaways that I've had from this documentary is we never talked about it as a family. My mom never said how she felt. My brother and my sister never expressed how they felt. I've never asked my dad, hey, what were you eating? Because I'm built like you. So if I don't start making some changes, I'm going to run down the same path you did. And so that's been one of the biggest blessings is that we sat and talked. I think a lot of times we go through a major incident with someone in our family and they make it through it and they're like, whoo, great job, everybody. We made it through. But we don't talk about how we got there, which I think is the biggest problem that we have.
Donnie, those could be described as lost years, the relationship with your children and with your wife, because you are trying to recover for so very long.
Yeah, when I looked at the film, let me back up. When Eric interviewed the family, I wasn't there for those interviews because I didn't want to influence those interviews. My wife, my sons, my daughter. But when I looked at the film and I saw the impact that my illness had on my family, it was devastating. I was like, and that's part of my motivation today to be as healthy as I can, strong as I can, so that I don't impact them like that again, or anytime soon. I'm 72. I have to remind my daughter. I said, hey, I'm not there yet. The day may come where you have to take care of me, but it's not today, and it's not tomorrow. So just watching the film, and during the film was the first time that I realized and I heard how they felt about my illness over that time period. And yeah, it was a lost time. Eric talked about me walking slow, moving slow. Yeah, it was all of it. I wasn't living. I was just existing on the medication. So yeah, it was a lost time for sure.
I have to tell you, I'm sad to hear that you, and then I think people would be grateful that you do get to know how your illness impacted them. And although it happens because of this documentary.
Yes, I agree with you 100%.
When did you decide to start writing? And was it, clearly because you almost died?
Well, I started writing. We had a conversation around the kitchen table. My daughter-in-law was like, she's a tennis player, and she was looking for someone to hit the tennis ball back and forth to her. And I said, hey, I used to play tennis, I'll play. And Eric came and he videotaped us, and he showed me the film afterwards. And I was so embarrassed of how out of shape I was. Going into the tennis match, in my mind, I'm thinking, I can do this. But my body was like, you cannot do this. This is not happening. And the very next day, I went out and bought a bike. Don't ask me why I bought a bike, but it was a bike.
Oh, I asked.
Well, go ahead, Eric. What'd you say?
I was like, because at this point, I don't know, because my dad has had a lot of hobbies. And so I'm like, is this just another hobby that he's trying to do? And then on top of it, he barely can get to, I mean, he was walking, but he would have to walk a little bit slower. And so you're going to get on a bike and ride around. I'm like, I don't know. It don't sound like a good idea. And I questioned it. You know, we talk on a regular basis, and I questioned it. I'm like, look, I'm here to support you, but you're just going to literally just jump on a bike? Sounds like a big ask.
And
it was a big ordeal, Carol. I literally rode around the block. Let me back up. When I went to buy the bike shop was 3 miles from my house, and I couldn't ride the bike home because I wasn't strong enough to ride it home.
Yeah. And was this, to be clear in the timeline here, was this after your third open heart surgery, you buy the bike?
Yeah, this was, I was like 65 and just turning 65. And I played tennis or attempted to play tennis with my daughter-in-law, bought the bike. And at age 65, I started riding.
And how soon could you ride around the block or ride 3 miles?
Well, it was over a period of time. Because when I got I first of all, I spent what I thought was a lot of money for a bike. I spent $1,000 for a Cannondale, and my wife was like, "Ooh, I don't know." So that was part of the motivation.
Is that really what she said, Donnie? Is that really what she said?
Well, I'm putting it for you can put it on the air. I literally rode around the block 3 times a day, and I'm saying it probably took me 2 months before I could ride a mile. But it came slow, but it kept coming. And the further, later on I rode 2 miles and 3 miles. And, but that was several months down the road. It wasn't right away.
Before we get into who pitches the idea to actually ride and then a documentary, I was struck with this thought just now, Eric. Were you ever mad at your dad for not being what, Donnie? What? You're laughing. Were you mad at him for having open heart surgery 3 times and not being healthy?
That's a great question. I would say, no, I wasn't ever mad at him. I mean, I don't think I was, he had 2 of them the same year because the first one was kind of botched. So right off the bat, he has 2. And then the third one he didn't have until later. I would say never mad at him because on the flip side, I had a very supportive, both of my parents are very supportive already, but I think that made my dad and myself a lot closer. I got to have breakfast with him in the morning, going to school, middle school, high school. He was at every single one of my practices for track, baseball, football. So while he wasn't able to, work the traditional job that he did before, he transferred that energy into me. And so I always had a support in everything that I did. I say it as a joke, but I remember when I told him at a real young age, hey, I want to get into soapbox derby racing. And he's like, well, let's go. I found a class. Let's just go see what it's about. And so a lot of people don't have that.
Right.
And so I'm very blessed at what I did have. And I think everything happens for a reason. And so, no, I'm never mad at him. Appreciate growing up and having that support every day of my life.
But scared to lose him at some point.
Oh, 100%. I think about where I would be today if I didn't grow up with my father. It would obviously be different. And so I'm trying to transfer that energy into myself now that I have a 2-year-old son, and I want to be there for him as long as, and plus, from how long my dad has been with me. And so I think it starts to hit different when you're doing it for somebody else in your family. Yes, you need to do it for yourself. That's the number one thing. But at the end of the day, it's not going to hurt to have loved ones around you that support you, that want to motivate you to do a little bit better.
And so who said to who, let's ride from St. Louis to Chicago? Who said that? Which one of you said that?
I'll let Eric deal with that one.
So clearly we know his answer. So I'm filming him throughout this process. I'm not thinking about making a documentary. I'm doing home videos at this point. Now, I am a filmmaker. I have worked on projects. I have a production company, but I wasn't thinking about making a documentary at the time. But I'm staying with him and following him around this journey because I think it's interesting. And he's telling me, I'm going to join a bike club and I'm going to start riding and do this. And then next thing I know, I start to feel guilty because I'm like, man, this dude is changing his life around and I'm videotaping him or recording him and I'm not doing anything to make a change. So I ended up purchasing a bike myself and started to ride with him. And we would get to the point where we would ride every weekend together, which was fantastic. we were starting to approach his 5-year anniversary of when he first started riding. And I'm all about celebrations, especially if you know my mom. I said, we got to do something.
Yeah.
And so I just started thinking of the most random things that we could come up with. And we landed on, let's ride our bikes from St. Louis to Chicago. He probably did not agree to it. Even when we were training for it, he probably didn't really agree to it till really a month or two out. He's like, I don't know if we're actually going to do this. So we're doing it.
So you're training and you don't think your dad's going to do it, although you're training.
I have so many phone calls of him saying, "Hey, this has been great. I love the idea, but I just want to let you know I'm out. I'm not interested to do this."
Oh my.
So then I gotta get the family to call him. I gotta get my wife to call him and to motivate him, say, "You can do it. We're gonna do it." And I don't think it was because he didn't believe he could do it. I think it was just all the logistics that went around it.
Yeah.
And he was just like, I'm not interested in doing all that comes with it. But I had to I motivated him weekly, if not bi-weekly, that we're doing this. I was sold.
The training was brutal. We trained, the training was harder than the ride. Well, except for day 3, the training was very hard. And yes, there was a couple times where I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't think I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine doing it. And so just trying to get through the training, we did one training where we rode 60 miles one day and 100 miles the next day. We did that like 2 weeks in a row. And I just, hey, I'm done. I don't want to do this.
And you say there were a couple of times you thought of not doing it. It sounds like Eric is saying it was every other week.
On the ride.
During the ride.
Well, okay, so we can talk about during the ride, and because there was a time that Eric was like, "I'm done," also on the ride from St. Louis. So I'll let him tell that story.
Was that the time when you were gonna cuss your dad out?
That was near one of the times, and I would never actually do that. I think it was important to say, this is how I feel.
Right, right.
Say, you can say all the things you want to say about how you feel about us, just keep it on the inside. So I kept it on the inside, but at that moment, I felt like saying some words that I would never say to him. So, yeah, that was one of those times.
Well, let's talk about the logistics of it. So, talk to me about planning and then the actual carrying out of a bike ride. 2 Black men from St. Louis, because not a lot of us bike like this, right? From St. Louis to Chicago.
There was go ahead, Eric.
Sir.
There was a couple things. One, I contacted, we knew we were going to ride Route 66, so I contacted that organization. They gave us a bike route. So I planned the bike route and over a 4-day period. There were some places and some conditions we were riding in, road conditions that I wasn't really happy about. And then there were some areas that we were riding through that 2 Black men in the middle of nowhere I was a little concerned about. To the point where I thought about inviting some people from my bike club so we'd have more people on the ride, which would have changed the ride entirely. So I did the route from St. Louis to Chicago. And then Eric changed the route because the hotels I was staying in, he didn't want to stay in. So I had to reroute to go to a different hotel that was acceptable to him. But that was a period of time, and I studied that route quite a bit. But you know what was really interesting? You can study that all you want, but you get out in the real world with construction and detours, and that was a real big part of it that we had to deal with on the route.
Okay, just a quick comment, Eric, about you and your diva attitude about hotels.
Oh yeah,
there's certain ones.
So there's not a lot of things in life that I'm going to complain about. I don't like to complain, but there's one thing that's very important to me is getting good sleep. And it doesn't need to be, a Ritz-Carlton or anything crazy like that. I just need to be comfortable because I'm going to be exerting all this energy. I'm going to be riding 10, 12, 13 hours a day. I need the window of me sleeping to be in a comfortable place. And so, we alter the route just a little bit so that we can make that happen. But the other thing to keep in mind, we also had a crew with us.
Right.
So we had about 10 people, and these are all people that I've worked with, and I want to make sure that they were comfortable as well, because a happy crew means happy footage, and everybody's, doing a great job. And so it was more than just me. But at the same time, a lot of these folks I've worked with in the past, they said, if Eric is picking the hotel, we're going to be okay, because he's not going to put us anywhere.
I ain't mad at you. I ain't mad at you, Eric.
Okay.
Not a bit. Not a bit. I stayed in a hotel once that my son chose, and I had to put a chair against the door.
Yeah,
See?
Never again.
See?
Never again. Donnie, on the route, this is described as a bonding experience. You already seemed like you were already close, but it was a bonding experience for you both.
It's funny, when Eric got very upset with me, that was a training ride, actually. And that we bumped very hard, very candid. We didn't talk to each other for several days. But that was the moment that we became close. That was the moment that we became a team. To date, there's nobody I'd rather ride with. When we ride, we don't even have to talk. We don't have to have the communication, because I know what he's going to do in almost every situation. So the bonding happened at the moment that we bumped real hard. And from that point on, we were a team.
So, Eric, what was your relationship like before, and then you described the bonding?
So I think because of what I mentioned earlier, my dad was at every practice, and I would say I'm a spitting image of him in many different ways. We're both part of the same fraternity. We both played football. We both ran track. I got into radio television because of him. So there's a lot of things that makes us similar, and sometimes similar,
Right,
that can
heads.
make repel from each other. And so I would say I don't think we were necessarily any closer, because with all the sports that I played growing up, he was at those practices and he was in my ear saying how I need to play better, and how I need to, how my performance needs to be. And so he established this rule between us. He said, when you're between the lines, when you're, playing a sport, you can be very raw with me on how you speak. As soon as you leave those lines, just know that goes away. So when we come home, don't be talking to me like that. But while we're in the activity, you can be, because we're competing. And so I think that's, what happened similar to the ride. While we were riding together, sometimes there'd be choice words, respectfully, but there'll be some choice words. But as soon as the ride was over, we go back to being father and son. And so, I would say I didn't realize how close we were until I start showing the film to some people. And they say, hey, your dad getting healthy is great. The bike riding is cool. But my favorite part is seeing you and your dad interact with each other. And since I'm in the relationships, since I'm in the relationship with my father, I never saw that. Yeah, I knew we were close, but I went back and watched the film from the aspect, let me just focus on how we interact with each other.
Yeah.
And I realized that we're goofy, I'll say sometimes.
Yeah.
We're really goofy on how we interact with each other. The love is there, but we're also the same person. That's the thing that my mom says. She said, they bump heads sometimes because they're the same person.
And I do love the relationship and the notion of bonding between father and son. And I will say, especially as the wife of a Black man and the wife of two sons, that relationship is priceless, and there's not enough representation of a healthy Black father and son relationship. There never has been in this country, so I applaud you for that. But as we said, this is about a miraculous recovery. This is a story of the healthcare system and one man's decision to try to do better, not only for himself, but for his family. Eric, talk about that part of the message for you, for Black men to take better care of themselves.
Well, as we started working on this project, one of the first questions I asked my dad, if he would commit to doing this film, his first response was, I don't think my story is that strong. And I had to explain, I had to pitch him and talk to him how important it was. And one of the biggest things that I wanted to showcase to him was, you're not a doctor, you're not a nutritionist. You have no background in the health industry. You are just someone who wanted to make a change in your life after you had a bad situation. And so you're going to motivate more people with your story of you being yourself than any doctor could ever do, than any health person could ever do. And so once he saw that, he was locked in. The other thing that we were focusing on when we were talking about building this project is who is this dedicated to? And real quickly, I wanted everybody affiliated with the film to know that this is dedicated to Black men. If anybody else gets value out of it, that is fantastic, and I welcome that. It's not to exclude anybody from what the message in this film is, but when you start looking at the statistics,
Right.
and you start looking at our history, you start to look at how we eat and how we're treated in the healthcare system, Black men are unfortunately at the bottom of the totem pole at almost every statistic that you can look at, including when even compared to Black women. And so I'm like, if there's any way that I want to use my talent to make a change in my community, I've been blessed with the ability to tell stories. So I want to showcase my father's story. So hopefully another Black man or another person can see his transformation and realize that they can do it for themselves, even if they're at 65 at that point.
And Donnie, you have been described as a miraculous recovery, what you have done. So from that standpoint, what is your message to other Black men and to all men about their taking better care of themselves?
I think of the whole medical field and what it took for me to get where I am. It wasn't the first, as Eric mentioned, the first surgery was kind of botched, and I had to have a second surgery that same year. Find a medical professional that can be part of your team, that will, in other words, where you feel comfortable asking questions about why am I taking this medication? What are the side effects? How long am I going to be on it? I had a cardiologist. I loved her dearly. She would come into the room, give me the medical journal, and say, hey, this is what I want to do. I'll be back in 15 minutes, and we'll talk about it. I think that's what you need. Also, find your vessel. I mean, mine was a bicycle. Yours may be bowling, skating, walking, pickleball. Find your vessel, find something that you love and do it. If you love it, you'll continue doing it. And I love cycling.
Well, I am so appreciative of your time, of joining us on the podcast here at 9 PBS. And it is a great story. It is emotional and impactful for sure. Eric D. Seals, a filmmaker, created this documentary, Bike Vessel, about his dad, really, Donnie Seals Sr., and their bike ride from St. Louis to Chicago. And you can see it on 9 PBS. Thank you both for joining us. Congratulations on the incredible documentary. And thank you for being goofy with me today.
Thank you very much.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us on another episode of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel. We'll be back with more, another great story coming up. But what you need to do is make some comments. Let us know what you think about this conversation. We love to read your comments, and we will respond to those for sure. And make sure you share this podcast. There is a man in your life who's probably not taking the best care of himself. This documentary, this conversation is just for them. Let them know that they matter and that they too can do what Donnie has done as well and take care of themselves and survive for those of you who love that person in your life. So subscribe, share, like, comment, download, do all those things, and we will be back with more. Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS.
Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel is supported in part by Midwest Bank Center, the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation, and Orvin and Latrice Kimbrough.